And updates are free from the Baby Lock website, and they have a lot of features on them. And then also talk a little bit about what the upgrades offer. There's a Solaris 1 upgrade and a Solaris 2 upgrade, and those are items that you pay for, but they have so many features. And then I'm going to go through, and I have a sample stitch out book, and I'm just going to show some of the stitch outs that I have
really
prepared.
Cool stuff.
And so when you do this, what I find is in your spare time, if you stitch some of these samples out, then when you're ready to dive into a project, then you have a visual of how and a reference so that you can sit down and have some success with your project.
Now, Diane is very organized with having her sample books. It's actually, it's wonderful. And, you know, I used to think, oh gosh, you know, I have to sit there and make a sample book, but it helps you. It helps teach you. You learn a lot more about it. And I tell you, it comes in handy. It's like having my little encyclopedia that I don't have to go and find those right stitches and the sizes and all that other stuff. So one of the things that we talked about is this isn't a project that we're doing today, but you're going to be learning these things that Diane just went over, because when I first got my machines, I didn't have anybody show me these things. And that's what happens to a lot of us. And I wish I knew some of the things that you're going to be showing us today, because it would have made my life a lot easier.
Well, and obviously, if you were going to sit down and do a class where we're actually making a project or we're designing something on the screen, that's going to add a lot more flair than what we're going to show today. But these are some of the necessary steps that you have to take in order to get that flair, in order to get that successful look, to get that your project so you're really proud of it. So it's setting your machine up, and in the machine there are settings pages, and they are specific for sewing or for general sewing machine setup. And then there's some that are specific to embroidery. So today we're just going to focus on the embroidery part. There is so much to cover on this Solaris. We could never get it done in a 2-hour video, could we?
Yeah.
So even with going through the settings pages, that's why I decided we're just going to hone in on just the embroidery ones. And then we'll be back on many, many classes to do Solaris things, so we can expand on this. Now we do have someone, if you have any questions, we have Susan that will be monitoring the class. So if you have any questions, type them in and then she can answer them. But again, we're going to kind of stay on the embroidery side, and I think we can go ahead and kick it off. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to be working on the screen. So what I'll be showing you here, now you all know that a stylus comes with your machine. So I could be using a stylus, or I have another stylus, and I could be using my pen, but sometimes that kind of blocks the view of what I might be showing you. So I do have a wired mouse hooked up. So what I want first is, can you see the cursor? I'm just kind of floating it around right now. So I want you to be able to say that, yes, you can see the cursor. To me, it made more sense to use the mouse so I could keep my hand out of the way so you would have better visibility, as opposed to me putting my hands up here and blocking the view. So if you want to send in a little thing so Susan can read it, that yes, the cursor is visible for you, and that might be better. I mean, from our vision, it looks great on the cursor, but we want to make sure that it's something that you can see, and that makes it good.
And this mouse, it's not a Microsoft mouse.
It's not a Microsoft mouse, and it's not a wireless mouse.
No.
It has to be a wired mouse, and you have 2 USB ports on the side of the machine. And one will have a picture of a mouse. So it's the second one down, and that's where you would plug in your mouse. You know, and everybody has wireless mouse, whatever you want to say. Everyone has it wireless nowadays. So you can pick up a wired one pretty inexpensively. But to me, it's a lot easier to navigate on the screen with a mouse than it is even with a stylus, even in your own home. So we're going to go ahead and get started, unless I hear something back from Susan that says, oh my gosh, I can't see anything. So what we're going to do is we are going to first be working with the settings pages and kind of describing some of those things that will make your life a lot easier. It will set you up for success. So when you're making your project, you can just dive right in. So in order to open the settings pages, I have at the top of my screen, I have several icons across the top. And the first one is a wireless, then you'll see a camera. The third one over looks like a little piece of paper with the corner turned down. This is going to open up our settings pages. So I'm going to click on that and it opens up another screen. If you look at the bottom, it'll tell you that there are 12 pages there. And on mine, it opened up automatically to page 4. But I can actually go through these very quickly and skim through, so I don't have to actually use the arrows at the bottom to page through those pages, that I can jump ahead to a certain category. So on the first icon here at the top, it almost looks like a little piece of fabric that you see a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch and a blanket stitch. If I click on this, this is going to take me to the sewing attributes. So if I do this, it's going to jump me to page 1.
Can I interrupt you just for a second? One thing that I wanted to remind everybody is this is being recorded. So if you're following along, don't worry if you lose your place, because you will have access to this recording, unlimited access, and you can go on it and watch it anytime you want after we send you the link. Go ahead, Diane.
That's awesome. So the first icon that looks like a little piece of fabric, that is going to set you up for different pages that you can make some adjustments when you're doing your sewing. Then if you look next to it, you have a picture of a sewing machine. That will take me to page 4. And this is for general machine setup. So it's going to ask you, what language do you want your machine to talk in? You can adjust the light and the screen brightness. So these are some just general terms when you're setting up your sewing machine. But today we're going to be working with embroidery. So if I touch that, it's going to take me to page 8. So when I turned it on, it went to page 1. So I would have had to thumb through each page. So again, it's a time saver. So
I love that.
I like it too. And then, you know, if you're working in embroidery, why do I have to thumb through all those other pages? So this is something very nice. Then we have an icon that's for our wireless. And then the one over here is our restore button. So what's nice about this, if we make any changes to these categories, that we can set it back to our factory settings with a click of a button. Now, if any of you have owned a Destiny, you also had the restore button, but what it would do is it would restore all the settings on the page that you were on. They've made it so much nicer in the Solaris, because now when you restore, it will restore the whole category. So instead of having to go through 4 pages of embroidery settings and change all the settings to factory, I can click the restore and it will change everything back to factory settings in the embroidery.
Like
so
most of the time, I don't remember what I've set it to.
Right. And then how do you know what even is the factory settings?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I look down here, anything that's in a black box, these are the settings, the factory settings. So here I can tell I'm going to restore this. And it says, what default settings do I want to set it to? And those are embroidery. So now the thing that it did change, it went from the 10 5/8 hoop by 10 5/8, and it actually picked up that larger hoop.
Yeah,
so that one is not in a black box, but everything else is in a black box, basically. So that's how we know that it set it back. So now it set everything in embroidery back to our factory settings. And again, we're working with embroidery and it turned automatically to page 8. I think on any of this, the way I kind of describe it is that we only have so much time to embroider, right?
Right.
And so anytime that you can save some time, that's more time that I can spend embroidering. So if I save 2 minutes of my day and I multiply that times how many times, how many more designs can I get embroidered before I get to the pearly gates?
Only Diane has figured this out.
I get to the pearly gates, I'll have more embroidery done. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to walk you through some of these things so that, again, we can help you get ready to start your next project. So the first thing that you have the ability to change is your frame size. And what I'm going to do is you have arrows over to the right-hand side, and it's going to, you'll see the hoop right now. So we all know the Solaris comes with that magnanimous hoop that it's about a little over 10.5 by 16. But if I want to work in a smaller, let's say I want to create a pillow and I want to be able to, let's say I want to create like a 10-inch pillow, and I want to make sure that my design stays within a, let's say the 10 5/8 inch square hoop. So if I arrow over here, I have all of the hoops that are available that will work on this machine.
Look at that.
Now, it's not just limited to the hoops that come with the machine.
Okay.
Because you only have the 4 hoops that come with a Solaris, but you have a lot more hoops that are available to you that are available for purchase, or if you are blessed or cursed, I don't know if it would be the right word. If you're blessed like me and I have an Elagio and I have an Elegante and I have a Destiny, well, so I have those hoops still available. So I still have like the 6x10 hoop from the Elagio. So if I wanted to work in that field range, I could. And then I have some that do not come with the machine, but are available for purchase. And so like the 8x8 hoop is probably one of my favorites that I have purchased because it's a square hoop and it's something that quilters really seem to love. So it gives me that parameters there. So again, a hoop that does not come with the machine, but it is available on my choices of hoops.
Now, what's the smallest size that it can go down to? Look at that.
Yeah, you can
look
keep
at all those choices.
Yeah, the smallest one is that little monogram hoop. It's only about little under 2.5 by 3/4. So it was that little bitty oval one that was used for monograms. It used to be included with some of the machines, but now because we always want bigger and bigger, that they've actually gone to the
So they didn't
size.
take away any hoops. They just kept adding.
Correct.
Okay.
And the other thing that they have down here at the bottom is that, so you have your 4x4, which we're all familiar with. And then you have your 4x7 and your 4x12. What those 2 hoops are continuous hoops. So they've even included those.
Okay.
So if I wanted to scroll up here and let's say I want to work in the 10 5/8 inch hoop, then I'm just going to choose that one. And it will actually show up it'll show up here on the grid here. But then when I would be in my design page, it would also show if I'm designing, I need to stay within these parameters. So if I wanted to come in and let's say the 8x8 hoop, I choose that. You can see now that that little square box makes it smaller. And then on the design page, it would also show up the same thing. So it gives you a visual. So the other thing, I can just leave it at the 8x8. The next thing that you have a choice of is a grid. And you have several choices on a grid. To me, the grid can be a help or a hindrance. Sometimes it's very helpful if you want to line things up. Other times it may be a distraction because you see all these grid lines on there. So it's nice to have the ability that a grid is not set up permanently, that you have the ability to turn it on or turn it off. So the top one is that this one here mean that you would have the whole open area with a center mark and you would see a little center dot. Otherwise, we can have just crosshairs where you actually have a X and Y axis and you will see a horizontal line and a vertical line. You have another one that does not have the little red dot in the center. And then these 2 here are probably the ones I use the most. I have an inch grid and then I have 3/8. And I kind of wondered, like, why didn't they just do an inch and then a 1/2 inch? But I think what I thought about is if you were lining something up and you just needed a 1/2 inch, you could actually position that so it was in between those 2 inch marks. But here they give you 3/8. So I commonly, if I'm working with something large, I'll use the inch one. But if I'm really working with some small letters and maybe I want to line something up, the 3/8 inch comes in really handy. So for this, I'm actually going to turn off so I don't have any grid showing up. But can you see where it would be a help to have that grid?
Absolutely, because I wouldn't know where to align it properly.
Right.
It would only, with that, you get precise measurements. It doesn't distort.
Nope. The next one is that we have our max embroidery speed. This comes up in classes all the time. Is like, what speed should I run my machine at? Well, if I look right here, I have a black box around this number here, which means that is the default of the machine, right?
Right.
And it comes up at 1,050 stitches per minute.
Wow.
That's the fastest this baby will go. If the factory's telling me that that's the default of 1,050, then I stitch at 1,050. 9 times out of 10, that's what I stitch at. The only time that I really take it down is if I'm working on something maybe that I'm using metallic red and I feel like I need to slow it down a little bit, or I will, if it's a kind of a dense design, then I can slow it down. But I'll have people in class and they'll say they'll slow theirs down. Let's open up our choices here. So it goes from 1,050 and then it goes down in 100-degree increments starting at 900 until it gets down to 400, and then it slows it down to 350.
Okay.
I mean, I've had a lot of people in class that say it's like they're scared and they stitch at 350 stitches a minute.
So we won't hurt our machine when we're going fast.
No. And stitching at 350 stitches a minute, that's like the very first embroidery machines that came out. That's about the speed. To me, this is like watching paint dry. That again, I want to get those designs done. So I usually stitch at 1,050 unless I'm experiencing some kind of problem or that I'm working with metallic threads and I need to bump it down.
That's good to know.
There are instances like the new magnetic hoop came out, and then when the machine senses that, the sensor reads that, it will automatically put that machine down to 600 stitches a minute. And that's because it's the weight of that frame that, so just for balancing, they
So we need to trust the machine that it knows.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So it won't let you bump it up.
Okay.
It won't let you bump it out. But I'd be interested for you to weigh in to hear how many people sew at 1,050 stitches a minute. And I know for a long time, the top speed was 1,000, and then they bumped it up and it was like a selling feature. It went to 1,050. And I'm like, 50 stitches more a minute? Come on, like, let's give us like a more 1,000 or at least 150 sounds like a whole lot of nothing. But again, I run mine most of the time at 1,050.
Okay, that's good to know, because I'm one of those timid ones who think, oh God, that's gonna be too hard on this poor little machine.
No,
okay,
no.
All right.
And then we have embroidery tension. The default is at 0, but you do have the ability to change your tension. If you're experiencing a lot of tension problems, you can change it here. But when you're in the embroidery mode and you're actually stitching, you also have the ability to just change your tension while you're doing that particular pattern, or if it's an area that you're having. So for the most part, I keep my tension at the default. And if I have to make some adjustments, I usually go into the embroidery screen.
So on this tension issue, this little portion right there, one thing that we notice is when someone uses this embroidery tension part,
it controls the top thread.
It controls the top thread. But what happens is when they don't reset it, and they do another type of embroidery or something else, they forget that they've adjusted it. So we find that they think that there's something wrong with the machine when there wasn't.
So my answer to that would be, anytime you sit down at your machine, I'd go and you're getting ready to embroider, I would touch that restore.
And just do the restore.
And then just go everything. And then you know that you're changing everything based on that particular project.
Okay.
Your embroidery foot height. Again, the factory has decided at what height that embroidery foot should be from your fabric. Now, what is different about embroidery foot height, and let's say when you're sewing, that foot actually rests on the fabric, because between the feed dogs and the feet, that's what's pushing that fabric through. So you want that foot to be resting on your fabric as it's sewing. On the embroidery foot, it just kind of skims the fabric. So it's just slightly above it so that embroidery foot, the fabric can move back and forth and that hoop can glide underneath it. So on the embroidery foot height, I usually leave it at the default, unless if I'm doing, let's say I bought a design and it was doing stitching on top of stitching. Let's say it was doing an eyeball of Frankenstein or something. And if it was doing that, and then so it was doing it did the eye, and then it came in with another color for the white of the eye, and then it did the black pupil of the eye. As if it seemed like there was a lot of buildup, I may bump that embroidery height up just 1 notch, and it'll help glide that. So if I'm looking at my machine sometimes, if it seems like that foot is like resting too low, then I'll just bump it up 1 notch. But you have to be careful. You don't want to bump it up too high, because if you start seeing some skip stitches, that's one good thing to check.
So question. If you are embroidering on a towel that or something like that, do you have to even adjust this embroidery foot height?
Typically not on just a regular terry cloth towel. If it's something that's a real lofty, one of those real super duper like hotel
Velourish.
ones or something. Again, to me, to judge it would just be if it looks like the foot is skimming above the fabric, you're in good shape. If
Okay.
it seems like it's dragging or sitting on top of it, then you need to just bump it up. Then we have needle embroidery stop position. So this is something relatively new that you can have a choice of. Do you want that needle to stop in down position, or do you want it to stop in up position? Now we have that feature on the sewing side, but now they add it for embroidery. So if you were embroidering and let's say you finished a color section, it cuts the thread, that needle's going to come all the way up.
Right.
But if for some reason you decide that you want to stop in the middle of the pattern to, let's say it looks like your thread is coiling, or you need to make some kind of adjustment and you manually stop the machine, then that embroidery needle will stop in down position. Okay. So that nothing's going to lose its place. It's kind of like sewing, like when you wanted to pivot on sewing, you want the needle in down position. So this just kind of holds your spot.
Okay.
So that is one of the newer features on this, and I like it. But the one next to it I really like. It's the embroidery foot auto down position. So I know several people had said that they had owned other brand sewing machines. Mm-hmm. And in the sewing mode, what they didn't like, if they were sewing, they always had to manually put the presser foot down. You had to touch the button on the front of the machine to lower the presser foot. Right. And on their machine, if they just touched the gas, the foot would all the way come down and they could get ready to sew. Well, then we would hear people say, if a baby lock would do that, then I would buy a baby lock. That's one feature that I really, really miss on it. So they did add that to the to the sewing side. Well, now they actually have it now for the embroidery foot side also. Cool. So now when you're ready, you're ready to start embroidering, you do not have to, if this is engaged, to on instead of off. So off is the default. If you turn this on, so now what will happen is when we're ready to embroidery, I don't have to worry about touching that presser foot down lever on the front of the machine in order to get it to lower. It'll automatically start as soon as you touch start.
That saved us another second.
I know, I'm telling you, how many more designs have we gotten done? So just now, have you seen some of the value here of just from page 8?
Wow, a lot of information.
There's a lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, how many of you are familiar with looking at these pages? Because I know I wasn't. Let us know. Give us some feedback on that, because I'm kind of interested in knowing. What we had talked about a little bit earlier, but when you're selling a machine, when someone like us, when we're demoing it, we're going to give you all the fun looking things and the bells and the whistles. But then once you get your machine, we forget to do the meat and potatoes of it. Right. And those little things are helpful. You need them.
Well, and some of the things too that, let's say if you've had an earlier version, some of them were added with an update or with an upgrade. And so you kind of forget to maybe go back to these. It seems like the time that is spent mostly in the settings pages on embroidery is that people are familiar with changing their frame size. That seems to be a common one. And maybe the grid. And then when we go to the next page, another one that we're all familiar with is our units, if we want to talk in inches or we want to talk in metric. If I were the developer of this, if I was the one that had was putting these pages together, I would have put unit on page 8.
Why?
Because if I come here and I have it on inches now, but if I put it on metric, let's say that's what I had it set at metric. So now when I come and I open up page 8, and now I'm into frame size. My frames are all in metric.
Oh, okay.
So some of them, by the back of your hand. I know that the 200 by 200 is 8 by 8. I know the 100 is 100 by 100. And some of them I am familiar with. But when we get up to some of these, like 272 by 408 and 240 by 360, sometimes those millimeters get lost in the shuffle because there's so many different choices here. And so if inches was up here first, I could just say, okay, let's talk inches. And then now everything on that page would have been in
We
inches.
need to have them change that.
We need to make our demands. But I go back and forth between inches and metric for several different reasons, especially when I'm in IQ Designer. But even when I'm designing on, when I'm working on some of the other things, if I'm working with a design and I want something to be, let's say 4 inches by 3 inches, that I kind of know what that's going to be like. If, as opposed to, let's make it by 200 by 150, I don't have a visual of that. You know, it's hard for me
You're
to
right.
visualize
Yeah.
what it looks like in millimeters.
Absolutely.
However, on the other side is that when I'm talking about stitch properties, that we don't talk about a stitch length in inches. We talk about that in millimeters. So if I'm going to be doing a stitch length of 2.5 or 3.0, I've done enough sewing, I kind of have a visual of that, but it's hard for me to convert, like, what's a 3.0 in inches? I don't know, you know. So I know the world has tried to get Americans to convert over to metric
I know,
forever
but
and
we're
a
just
day.
not going to do it. It's not happening.
Way back when I was in grade school, and it still hasn't happened. So, so again, it's something that you can choose and go back and forth to. So I find I go back, especially in IQ Designer, I'm constantly going to page 9 and changing back and forth to inches and to metric. So the next thing we have is thread color. And if we click on here, we have 2 choices. We have number 1, 2, 3, and we have name of color. So for the most part, when I'm working with this, I have a tendency to work with name of color because I don't need to know exactly what thread brand of what brand of thread I'm using, or I'm not locked into that I have to use color number 1, 2, 3, 4. That if I want to use a green, I'm going to pick out any shade of green.
Right.
So I usually typically put name of color. So it would just come up on my design that it's red, green, blue, vermilion, orange, as opposed to if I check 1, 2, 3, now it opens up another tab underneath thread brand. And now it lists several different brands of threads.
Wow.
So now what it would do is it would, when I choose a design, and if I have thread brand and I've chosen Madeira Poly, it will actually show me those thread colors and the color number of it.
Okay.
I mean, when I was on the retail side of it, it was not uncommon for someone to come in. The designs came in, and you would buy a design pack, and it would have a picture of the design, and then it would have the thread order and the color number listed.
Right. And
people would come into the store with their list, and they would not, for the love of God, would not deviate off of that list. If it called for sulky number, 1, 2, 3, 4 again,
I want that one.
That's one that they had to have, and they came with their list, and they had to make sure that it was exact that color. I, on the other hand, I'll just pick the colors that I want, and I mix brands that.
And I mean, for some people, it's fine if they want to be that organized or about it, but
and some people, it's a challenge. It's a challenge for them is thread color.
Yeah.
But here you have the choice.
I think it also makes a difference on what type of an embroiderer you are. I think sometimes when you're doing very intricate designs that call for shading or things like that, maybe they would want more of the brand with the exact little shade separations. It's too much work for me.
Well, and there was somebody that was a new embroiderer, and she could not understand why you would need. She had pink. She had a pink thread. Why would I need 4 shades of pink? I have pink. Well, if you want to do a rose, you're going to need several different colors of pink. And I tell this joke quite a bit in one of my classes, is that my dad had questioned me one day about, Diane, like, how many spools of thread do you think you have? Just general. I don't need a specific number. What do you think? Just how many threads do you think you have? 300? And I said, in green. I have 300 shades of green. I think he was trying to pick an argument with me, and I kind of set him straight, and it kind of ended it right there. But for you all on the other side of the camera, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And but for the person that's not into that, they don't get that. Okay, so the next thing we have is embroidery background color. And what we have a choice of here is when we choose our design, right here it's chosen in white. So this is our background here. But let's say we were going to stitch something on a mint green piece of fabric. So we could actually change the color and it would put this in the background. So when we chose our design and positioned it here on the design screen for us, it would now give us an indication of what that design might look like.
Okay, I've never used that before.
haven't?
I always kept it white.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, white. Sometimes I'll do it as a light gray, but again, it just gives you, I mean, and if it's not going to be a print fabric, but it can give you, again, it's
an
a visual.
idea. Yeah.
It's a visual.
Okay.
The same thing that we also have thumbnail. Thumbnails are all the little pictures of the designs that you get to choose from. You can actually do the same thing, that you can say, okay, I want to see what these designs look like. So now you can see multiple designs and what the colors may look like. Okay. It's all about the visualization to make it easier. Okay, thumbnail size. This is something that they added to the Solaris, that now we have a choice of 3 different thumbnail sizes.
Cool.
In the past, it's always just been 2. We've had large and small. For many, many years, we had 1 size. And I remember we were preparing for our Baby Lock convention. And whenever we had to teach a class, we always presented it to the sales team, to our inner circle, kind of as a practice and to inform the team of the changes. And so one of the gals was teaching, I can't remember if it was the Elegante or if it was the Elagio. But so there were a lot of wows about the machine. Well, one of the things they had added was that they added a large thumbnail. We had a small thumbnail and then a large thumbnail. And she mentioned it, but she kind of dismissed it and said, you know, so now we have 2. It's not that big of a deal. Right. Well, at the time, the president of Baby Lock had said, wait a minute. He said, it is a big deal. He said, it took us 3 years to convince the factory to give us a large thumbnail. And he said, because, you know, that our clientele are a lot older now. Their vision is strained sometimes, or just you're looking at, those screens were not as big as they are now either. So those thumbnails were a lot smaller. And then if they're a lot smaller, then you can't see the intricacies of the design. So now by having a larger thumbnail, you know, then
I'd use the big one.
So any of the changes that they put into the machine, look at them as a blessing and something that maybe has taken a long time to develop. Okay.
Well, so when they do these developments, don't they ask the educators and retailers as well as consumers?
Yes, they try to get input from as many users as they can. Okay. So it's the people that were in the building that sewed on the machine. It was the educators that are out in the field. I mean, I would see the president walk around at different shows and stuff and ask people about, if you had to build the next machine, what would you want in the machine? And so some of these things, one lady said one time, this is what she wanted to do. She wanted to be able to lift the lid of her machine, and she wanted a funnel in the top. And she wanted to be able to pour the fabric in and pour the thread in and pour the stabilizer and push the button and say, go ahead and make it all work on the pattern.
Yeah.
And he kind of laughed and he said, you know, we could probably do it. I'm not sure you could afford it.
But you know what? This just shows you that your voice matters.
It does. Yeah. It really does. And I know when the Destiny first came out, and I'm trying to think, did it have 5 fill patterns? And we were preparing for that class. And by the time we were finished preparing for the class, we were so bored with those 5 fills. And it's like, oh my gosh, how long do we have to wait till we get more? Well, now the Solaris 2, we have 42 fills.
Oh, that's amazing. You know,
so again, I mean, the best thing is to get the information from the people that use the machine. The engineers, some of the stuff that maybe they come up with, it's stuff that it sounds good and sometimes it's fluff. But for the hardcore user, this is the stuff that makes sense.
It makes the
difference. So it's nice that they value opinions,
absolutely.
You know, and that's how a lot of this was evolved over the years. So down here at the bottom here, we have embroidery basting distance. I don't know how many of you use this feature as far as basting your fabric to your stabilizer. It is a feature that I find invaluable. I find I use it more and more. So let's say something like if you were using like a velvet fabric or something with a lot of nap on it, you can't really hoop that fabric because it'll leave what we call
The
hoop burn.
mark.
So what I'll do is I will take my hoop and I will hoop my cutaway or my tearaway, and then I will lay my my velveteen, let's say, or corduroy, I will lay that on top. And then instead of using a spray or maybe a sticky stabilizer, I do like sprays. I know a lot of people can't use them. It bothers
Right.
their breathing and stuff. I do use them, but I find that I'm using the basting thing more and more. So what that will do is if you add a basting stitch, the very first thing it will do is it will do a basting stitch around the perimeter of your design before it goes into embroidering that design. But you have the ability to set that distance, how far away you want it from the design. There is, what is it, point, almost like a quarter of an inch here, but I probably wouldn't pick zero, because then that would be like almost right on the
Right,
design and it
yeah.
would make it hard to pick out. I've also used the basting stitch as a guide then, that if I was doing, let's say, a pillow and I put a basting stitch down it, what I might do when I need to trim up that pillow to size, now I have a square around my design.
Okay.
And so now I can
And
lay
you
my
just-
ruler on it,
okay, yeah.
and I can trim away a
That's-
half inch or a quarter inch from that. So it aids me in that way also. And then we have our background image display. When you scan a piece of fabric to see where you want to position your design, it will scan the fabric and it will put the image on your screen. Okay. And you can tell it to scan, quality is fine or standard. For the Solaris, they put that the default is fine. Most of the time it has been standard. I have always scanned on standard unless I have had an issue.
So what is the difference?
It just picks up more detail.
Okay. Okay.
But then on the background image, what we have here is you have the word delete. So sometimes what would happen is, let's say you scan your fabric. And so you scan the fabric, it puts the image on your screen, and then you pull up your design, and then you decide, you know what, I can't embroider right now. Something's come up, you turn off your machine or whatever. When you turn your machine back on, that background of your fabric is still on the machine. And then people are always like, how do I get rid of this image? Well, all you have to do is go to page 10 and touch delete.
Okay.
And it gets rid of that design on the screen. Then we have a fabric thickness sensor. The default is off. But if you were embroidering on some thicker fabric, and I've done like a regular quilt sandwich with warm and natural, and I don't have to go through this process for that, but this would be thicker maybe if you're using higher loft. You could turn this on, and what it will do is it will actually kind of scan the fabric. It will walk you through a process where I'll tell you to put the sticker down, and it'll walk you through and it'll scan the fabric, detect the thickness of the fabric, and then it will kind of adjust the presser foot height for it so you get a better.
So as it scans it, it is actually
It's like measuring the thickness. Again, for the projects that I've worked on, most of the time I do not need this because I don't use a high loft batting. The last thing we have, and it is grayed out, but on the Solaris, the embroidery foot is the W foot. And for those of you that have traded in your Destinies for a Solaris, let's say, you had a W plus foot. And what the W plus foot was, is that it plugged into the back of your machine, right?
Right.
Okay, so this one does not plug into the back of the machine because we have the projector and all of that. So if you still had that foot, or you liked that foot and plugged it in, you can actually put that foot on instead, and then it will, then you're going to have to kind of do like a calibration. So what's going to happen, the difference is, if you wanted to find the center position on your fabric, where the needle was going to drop, let's say, with the Solaris, with a regular W foot, what it would do is it would put a green, like a capital T. And so the center would be where the two bars come together. On the Destiny with the LED, it just shined a little red dot down. So if that seems to work better for you, then you can use a W plus foot if you have one with your old machine, or you can actually purchase one.
Okay, so they didn't take it away. They just gave you a little option to work with. So those are the two options.
The next one have to do with all the wireless, and as far as upgrading and all that machine. we kind of talked about maybe going through some of this stuff, but then we just decided that that may be a whole class in of itself.
Absolutely.
So how to upgrade the machine and how the whole wireless sets up. So that we may go ahead and do as another class, if that sounds good to you. But one thing I wanted to point out on page 12, because that leads into my next subject, is that on page 12, you'll see that you have the latest version and it says 3.5. So that, or 3.05. So that is the most current version that's on the Baby Lock website. So if I want to, let's just go back, let's see on this. If I want to go back and update my machine, so now let's talk about some of the updates. The difference between the two is that we have updates and we have upgrades.
I always get those two mixed up.
Updates are free.
Updates are free. Okay.
Okay. So updates are free and they are from the Baby Lock website. So you would go to the Baby Lock website and you would download that update to a USB drive. Now, I would say probably one of the most important things is to follow the instructions that are on the Baby Lock website, because some of them are very specific. So one of the things that they'll tell you to do is that if you're going to download that update, that you should download it to a USB.
Right.
It's actually, you could do it to your computer and go direct connect. It goes a lot faster if you do it through a USB. If you use a USB, it should be a designated one that's only used for doing your updates, meaning that you're not going to have designs and other kind of stuff on the USB. They recommend about a 4 gig because sometimes the updates contain a lot of information, so you don't want to have a USB that's too small. The other thing is that when I do mine, I may delete the files that are on it, but I also reformat that USB. So now I know it's completely clean. The biggest thing too is to follow the instructions. So like on this, it said the most current version is 3.05, but on the Baby Lock website, it may say, and I don't remember the numbers exactly, but I'll just throw it out there. It would say, if you have version 2.03 or lower, make sure you update your machine to, let's say if it was a 2.04, 2.06. I'm throwing numbers out there, okay? But it may say, if it's lower than that, do the 2.06 before you jump to the 3.05.
So you have to do, sometimes you have to do the other ones, otherwise the new one won't get work. Is that what happens? Or you miss out on things?
I don't think you'll miss out on things. I just think it has to be in a sequence.
In a sequence, okay.
And so again, they're the engineers. There's reasoning behind it that maybe is above my pay grade that I don't know about, but that they do it in, because sometimes you can just go to the next one. But if it puts on there in the instructions, if your machine is below a certain version, do this one before you jump up to the next one.
Right.
And there may be several, there could be a couple different updates on there.
So how do you know when versions are out? I mean, one of the things is you actually become a member to the Baby Lock site, right? Because they send out newsletters constantly.
They'll send out.
Your retailers send out newsletters or information on updates, so that you can go in.
Diane,
those are some of the.
I don't want to interrupt, but I have a question.
Okay.
Why not update directly from the web? Is the question.
Yes, because what I've heard is if you go from the web directly to to the computer, that it's just slower.
Slower.
Yeah. Everything I've heard is that it's a lot faster to do it on
USB. And what size USB stick are you thinking?
Yes, a USB. You can also on page 12, again, we're going to go into this later, but there'll be auto downloader. You can update it manually. It can give you information that there is an update available. It will give you information the update is available, but you still have to put it onto the USB.
So question, auto download, does that come through
That's through your
Wi-Fi. Okay.
Yeah. But you have to make sure that you have a strong connection of your Wi-Fi.
Right.
You know, and then people worry about their walls. Are they going to have a strong enough thing, or is it going to tie it up? Again, if it's faster, it's just faster, and I just do it, and then I know that it's loaded. And
oh, you know what? This brings up a point. When you take these babies home, any of your machines, don't plug them into the wall, and you need to get a battery backup, because it's very important. We plug all of our machines into a battery backup.
Really?
Yes. We find that the little power supply cords are not enough protection, because sometimes what happens is certain brand machines, there's surges that come through where it just depends on where you are on the electrical grid. If sometimes your home will be at the end or at the beginning, and certain sparks come through. We had a lot of issues, especially
I'm thinking in California
with our
brownouts.
the brownouts and everything. So one of the big things we do is make sure, take a battery backup home with you. It's, $50 or $40. It's worth it to save your machine, because it has in the past messed up your computer.
So how does that work? I know, let's say if we were doing, if I was doing an embroidery design and the power went out, and then now
the battery backup, your machine will, of course, it saves it on there, but it keeps that when your power goes out, and if the power comes back on, it keeps that surge from spiking through.
Okay.
And I know, because we've had so many people have this issue. It's interesting how that happened. Here it is. Here's a little guy, and we have him here, but make sure you use this, because it saves your machine.
So it looks like there's several plugs in it, like a surge protector that you could plug in.
Oh, yeah, you can plug in. There's several plugs in it. You can, do all kinds of things to it. It's wonderful. So you really want this, and you don't mess around with it, I tell you, especially if you live in California.
Yeah. Well, I know when I come to Fresno, so I'll be here 2 weeks, that that was one of the last things I did before I left home, is I went through and unplugged every one of my machines, that I don't want to take a chance of,
absolutely,
bad weather or, thunder, lightning and stuff like that I don't want to take a chance.
You just don't know. We've had, and I'm not just talking the Baby Lock brand. It does it to all of the brands that have electronic or computerized.
Well, it should be your computer and everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we're so casual with some of this stuff.
We forget, and I always thought the power surge protector was enough. And those one little thing, those don't do anything anymore. So do that.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to continue on with some of the update information, some of the things that were, if you go to the Baby Lock website, these are some of the features that have been added that are free of charge for you. Sometimes they will give a description of what has been added in an update. Sometimes, just like on a computer update, sometimes they're just there to fix a little glitch. So let's say one time it could have been, it's going to fix the stitch quality of when you're embroidering font number 3, letters ABC. So sometimes it's a fix for something like that. And then sometimes it's a lot bigger than that are features that you could really use.
Okay, let's see.
So I've kind of got a list of them, because obviously I don't memorize everything here, but for some of the sewing things, I kind of combined them together on the updates that have been added on the Solaris. I didn't break them down into which version or anything, but for the sewing, they've made some improvements for the Guideline Marker.
Okay.
And they've added it so that you can use it with the character decorative stitches. And they've also now, just like I showed you for embroidery, the embroidery hoop, that you could change your background color. Now you can actually see the background color when you're using the guideline marker and the decorative stitches. So, and the default on the guideline marker was going to be on instead of off. So they've added some features like that for sewing. But again, the concentration here is on embroidery. So one of the things that it added that I found super beneficial was, we've all had this happen where our embroidery thread, our bobbin thread runs out, right?
Oh gosh.
So, you know, when it used to, years ago, it used to be that it would give you the warning too far in advance.
Yes.
And then you would look at it and you go, my gosh, I could have easily finished that design in probably a portion of another design.
Yeah.
Well, now there's not very much warning at all. I want to say it gives you about 12 to 18 inches of thread. It's not very much
thin,
at all.
Yeah.
So now when that message comes up, they've given you a, I don't want to say it's a warning. It's a little friendly reminder that now what they've given you is, okay, your bobbin thread is running out, but how would you like to do a few lock stitches before you take that off and change it? So what you can do is you press the reinforcement button. So that's the one on the front here. I've heard people call it the bullseye button. I've heard people call it the Cheerio. And so it kind of looks like a little, just like a little bullseye. It's right along the top next to your needle down position. But so before you take that hoop off and change out the bobbin, you can actually press that little reinforcement and it will do a series of locking stitches. So now that you know that thing is locked in, your stitches are locked in place, then you take it off and then you put the new bobbin in. In the past, typically what I would do is that I would just go back and stitch over, maybe 10 stitches or something. But then you do get some of that, and it's not offensive, a little build up, and depending on the design, sometimes you can notice it, sometimes you can't. But that's a free update thing that I think is a really nice little feature.
I'm going to use that. I did not know about that one.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I like that one too.
Okay.
And also, helps keep that thread from unraveling and stuff like that. Something that people have been waiting for a long time is that, okay, so we know that when we pull up a design, it tells us that it's going to take X number of thread changes, it's going to take how many stitches it's going to be, and it'll also give you a time. Well, what they've changed on this one now is that once your embroidery begins, it updates that time every minute. So now that you know that it's a 40-minute design and now you've already stitched, 12 minutes, 13 minutes, 14 minutes. So
I
it'll
love
keep
it.
that.
The countdown. Yeah, you need that.
People have been asking for that for years.
Oh my God.
So
that's
a huge one too. Again, something else that's free. I mentioned a little earlier, but it'll recognize that magnetic frame that is it's like 14 by 7 inches. I have not put my hands on one yet. I'm a little leery of putting my hands on one now because they say that magnetic hold is pretty strong. And just a few weeks ago, I had a pacemaker put in unexpectedly. And so, you're kind of supposed to stay away from magnets. And I had asked about the doctor. They said, just bring one in. Everything is supposed to be at least 6 inches away from magnetized. But I did use the dime hoop because I had that one. And those magnets, I don't think are quite as strong as what I'm hearing about this. Because even on this one, there's a warning on there. Do not use if you have a pacemaker. But I did use the magnetic one, the dime one. And you're thinking, gosh, I'm working on a table. Of course, I'm going to be 6 inches away. But having this be so new, I was lining something up and then I had to see if it was lined up at the top. And there I was leaning over the table. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to die right here. I hope I got that other design done before I got to the pearly gates. But that magnetic hoop, again, is that it's people are raving about it. And I think they're on back order at Baby.
It's really cool. They're on back order. We're waiting.
People are raving about it and it's really holding the fabric nicely. But again, it's heavy. It's something that'll work on the Solaris. It will not work on the Destiny. And it's basically, the frame size will fit on there because it fits within those realms.
Right.
But it's because of the weight, and this arm will support it better than what the Destiny will. So, but again, then it will slow that speed down. So it'll recognize it in your frame description here, but then it will also slow your machine down.
And one of the cool things with it is you can do your continuous embroidery
Yeah.
and just keep moving it. And the way you move it is amazing. We'll do a whole series on that one because
Yeah, I'll need a class on that
oh,
one first.
absolutely. We'll put a shield on Diane.
Yeah, even going through checkout or through checking at the airport.
Oh,
You know, that was the very first time I told the guys I have a little anxiety about this. So I know it wasn't I wasn't gonna blow up or anything, but it's
well,
there's something inside you that
know.
you hadn't anticipated.
And a lot of us, you know, are in that position. We don't realize it and think about it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know, or, you know, I would like read my iPad or something and then, you know, then I'd need to just sit down and take a nap and you automatically,
Oh, it's on my, yeah.
and then you can't do that either. So it's
I
little
didn't even
things
think
like
about that.
on your
Okay.
phone. So
All right.
a lot of things. All right. So something.
We're down to our last hour. So,
Okay. One of the other things that was on an update, this is another feature that I have used already several times. I'm teaching a class here on Saturday, and I used it on that. It's called alignment justification. And I really like this. So whether you're doing lettering or you're doing designs, you can bring in, let's say you can bring in a letter here and let's say something down here, a design. And then you could tell it that I want to align those up and I want them to be on the same alignment. I want them to be all on the same baseline.
okay.
So if I touch that, if I select those two designs and I say, choose the alignment that I want on the same baseline here, then they will all be on the same baseline. So this kind of eliminates some of the stuff for the grid. So instead of like looking straight up at your grid and counting each little number, then and making sure that's lined up and, you know, zoom, zoom, zoom until you get into the right
that's
size.
cool.
So it will align. So you can have it align at the bottom. You can have it align at the top. So this pillow that I had done, it had boo and it was B-O. It was like in 4 quadrants. So I could line these two because they're not right next to each other. They're far away.
Yeah.
So you have that bottom alignment. But then when I was aligning this letter and this letter, I could select those two and say, I want you in a vertical center alignment.
Okay.
And then if I'm aligning here and here, I can make sure that's horizontal. So
wow. So we're having this class. Diane's teaching it. Actually, it's this Saturday, and it's the get your boo on.
Yeah, something like that.
It's a darling pillow for Halloween. If you want to learn how to use your Solaris and how to make a project, go to the website. Go to kikisquiltcheck.com. and sign up for the class or call the store 559-412-8233. Sign up for the class because we still have seats available, and bring in your Solaris and we're going to provide everything else. You just have to get some of the threads and you can make these wonderful pillows. I'll have to go find the pillow and show you guys before we
But it is for Solaris owners only. And we've had people call that have Destinies and, but in the past, I kept hearing, don't you have just a Solaris class? So I developed it for Solaris owners. So to use some of the features that are on the Solaris exclusively. So that is, oh, here we have Miss Savannah again.
We've got the boo pillow. Look at this. Adorable.
So I use that alignment tool to align those.
I love that.
Letters up, which are really designs.
Yeah, look at that.
So,
and then she's got the rhinestones, and these were all designs that are in the Solaris. Yeah.
And then the ghost was actually digitized from the center embroidery design.
Oh, I
by
love
erasing
that.
it.
Yeah.
So
anyway, you get the whole pillow. Look at that. You get everything in it, and you get to put a zipper in and all that kind of
but
fun stuff.
that was a good way to use that alignment feature.
It teaches you a lot of techniques and a lot of things that you get to learn on your Solaris. So make sure you sign up.
Okay, then what have they added for IQ? I'm sure several of you watching were previous Destiny owners. I feel pretty comfortable in saying that. So one of the things that, that I'm just gaga over IQ. So one of the things that we did in IQ when we did the decorative fills, you had a choice of what size that you wanted that fill to be. You also had the angle that you wanted to put it in. And then one of the other features, if you wanted to add this little running stitch outline, which 9 times out of 10, we'd say, turn that outline off. And all it did was a little running stitch. You may have chosen a candle wicking stitch. So it would do this running stitch before it did the candle wicking. They were 2 separate entities. So the running stitch, if you forgot to turn it off, it was not offensive, but it really didn't add much to the design. So finally, on one of the updates here, they made it so the default was off.
Oh,
So if
thank
you
God.
want that little running stitch, so it's just something that you don't have to think about. And to me, it's a godsend. It was
Oh,
something that was asked for
absolutely. Yeah.
years. So a little bitty thing, but for some of us, it's a big thing. Okay, so you were talking about the backup. Another thing here that the machine has built into the backup is for years we had the resumption mode that when you were in embroidery. And so if the power went out and then the power came back on and you turn your machine back on, it would ask you, do you want to resume stitching where you were?
Right.
And you'd say yes, and it would take you right back to where you were. Well, what they've added in one of the updates, they've also added for IQ. So if you were in IQ and designing and the power went out and you turned it back on, then you would press IQ and it would come up and say, do you want to resume? To me, well, I don't know. To me, I think that's almost a bigger deal. That because designing takes a long time.
So much time.
That at least if you're embroidering, you could maybe kind of figure out where you were.
Right.
But either way, both of the resumption.
Yeah, but losing your design and having to start over is the worst thing ever.
And then again, just to compound the fact that our eyes are getting older. And sometimes it's harder to see when you're an IQ designer and you are designing and let's say you scanned an image in and then you had to erase some of the things that you didn't like. We had the ability to zoom in. It was 200, 400, 800%. Now they've added 1600%.
Oh my gosh.
So now you can see every single little pixel if you wanted to erase. So that's a huge deal.
That is amazing.
And again, that was something free on an update.
I love that. That IQ Designer is a powerful
It is.
module.
It's kind of funny because it's a lot of the stuff. I mean, some of the stuff we always had to go to software to do.
Right.
And people are terrified when you use the word software. And I think because I know people are still scared sometimes of IQ, but I think on the other hand, our machines are friendly, user friendly. And so now that it's built in the machine, you're not quite as scared. You know, you need some little guidance on IQ, but it's not quite as terrifying.
I don't find it as intimidating to design on IQ as it is to do it on a software.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot that you can do in IQ. Obviously, there's more that you can do in software.
Right.
But I spend so much time on the machine that don't ask me to teach a palette class because I wouldn't do it justice because I don't spend my time there.
Right.
If I had to get up to snuff.
Again, it's up to the person. I love software, to design softwares. I don't have the time to actually study it properly, but I do have the time to learn the IQ. It just seems faster to me.
Well, and I don't know, is it just the fact too that you're doing it all here?
It's all here and now. Yeah.
It's not like you have to go someplace else. And
I don't have to open my laptop
So,
and you can save your designs.
Yes.
So that's even better. It's like, well, okay.
Yep. So what else do we have here? On the Solaris, that you have several different outlines that you can choose from. On the Destiny, we had candle wicking chain and bean stitch, running stitch, and zigzag stitch. Well, now they've added a lot of other fancier stitches like a blanket stitch, and then some with little dots. Well, you can also flip those designs, so you can kind of mirror them. Well, sometimes when it first came out, that when you flip some of the designs, did it actually fall on the line, or did it fall somewhere in between? So now they've kind of changed it so the axis lines up. So they did a little improvement on that.
Good.
When you're in IQ, when you scan an image, you can see your backdrop image, which you've always been able to do. But then there's also a little slider bar for transparency. So if you want to hide that background image, you could do that. So now they added a few more levels of transparency so that you can see it. You have different levels of seeing it. I haven't played with that one much yet. Usually I would just make it all go away, but there's instances that maybe you want to see it. But again, it was something that I'm sure people have asked for, so they've added. So now there's 6 levels of adjustment for that. When you scan, usually you have to crop your image in IQ. Now you are down at the bottom, you can tell it before you send it over, you can tell it what color and what line type you want it to be. So it might save you a step on that. And once you scan an image, now it will save the most recent.
So, nice.
So that's kind of nice. Then they have, you know that there's a couple different apps that are available now for the machine. There's one that was with upgrade number 1, and it was called IQ Monitoring. And so if you were embroidering and you ran upstairs to cook dinner, it would actually it would give you, you'd have your phone and it would give you a warning like your thread broke or it's time to change threads. And so now you could run back down to your sewing room and do all that. So it kind of monitored what was going on with the machine. So that was in upgrade 1. In upgrade 2, they added one called the IQ Positioning, which is a little, to me, it's like a misnomer. It doesn't really describe exactly what it is. Because when I'm thinking positioning, I mean, it's helping me position really what it is. And on this one, really what it's doing, I think because it has 2 segments for one of the other machines, the Meridian and stuff. But how it's useful on here is that if I had let's say I Google search for a ghost, an image, a clip art image of a ghost. So what I could do on that is save that to my smart device, to my iPad or to my phone.
Okay.
And then I could send it to the machine.
Oh, cool.
So
okay. All right.
That's something else that we can work with in the in another class.
Okay.
Okay.
Can
So
you just, because you know what? When you use your iPhone all the time, I mean, you're looking through stuff or your iPad, it's so much more convenient that way. I love that. That's a good feature.
You know, and they said too, there's more technology built in our iPhone than was built in like the first launch on the moon kind of thing. I mean, there's so much that's built in on that little.
I love that they're utilizing that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a lot of bang for no buck, I should say. I mean, you put out the money for that, but all of those updates that I've just gone through, I mean, they didn't cost you any extra. And you still got a lot of features. So I commend the companies for giving you that. However, they're still going to have their hands out because they want a little bit more money. But those things, and for retailers and for consumers, these other things that I'm going to go through are things that are built in on the upgrades that are going to cost, but they're going to be more feature packed and things that are going to add a lot more to your sewing. And so on upgrade 1, some of the things they add is they actually put another category in for sewing. And it would be like you had your utility stitches and character decorative stitches. You have another couching. Then you have another category, the S category. And it gave you 3 different stitches that kind of look like the hand look quilting stitch. Some people were comparing it maybe to like a Sashiko stitch. It's not, it doesn't equate to a Sashiko stitch because on that one you got actually a stitch and a space. Here you can actually, in between that long stitch, you can still see a little bit of the stitch, but there's 3 more stitches that came with that. And then they also have a couching, a zigzag couching. So it came with a foot and not the foot. It came with a little guide that you put on the side to hold your yarn. And then if you use your digital dual feed and then that cording foot that came with it, you feed your yarn through there and it would zigzag and you can couch. Now that is on the sewing part. Later that we've added.
They don't have that on the embroidery part.
They have couching, but it's different.
It's different.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that. So in embroidery, on upgrade number 1, thing that we all love is it actually came with a 10 5/8 inch square hoop, which, I mean, I was madly in love with the 9 1/2 inch hoop, square hoop, you know, and
so
now my love
the
is,
new one.
soon it's going to be, I want a 12 inch square hoop. It's never enough.
It's so great when you don't have to continuously rehoop.
That's right. So then you asked about the couching. So there are couching designs that were included with the upgrade that are included with the embroidery. Some of those designs look very familiar. They were some of the same designs, not all of them, but some of the same designs that were included in bobbin work on the Destiny.
Oh, okay.
So the couching, it does also have a yarn guide, but it's different from the sewing one. So the two guides you have to, keep separate, and it comes with another foot. So there's a foot and a guide that goes for the couching.
So one of the things that we are going to be doing again are classes virtually or in-house that are specific to some of these upgrades.
Absolutely.
So we're going to, Diane's going to be putting together things to use those couching feet to do all this fun stuff. So with her ideas on what to make and with her showing us how to actually use the item, it's going to be so much fun. So make sure you look for that in the future.
Yeah, it's this stuff never ends. There's always something to do, and playing with it and trying different yarns and different techniques, and it's a learning curve, and you're going to find what you like and what you don't like, and different yarns are going to react differently, and it's just something fun. I really enjoyed doing the bobbin work on the Destiny, and that is sewing upside down basically. This is, again, it's all this stuff is adding dimension and texture to your project, and I think people really like that
just
aspect of it, instead of everything just being kind of a flat.
So that's one of the things, Kiki's is not just a retail store that has beautiful fabric, great machines. We are an education center. That's one of the big things that we believe in. And so we want to share all that information, and we want to teach you. And the only reason I love that is because I was the one that would go to all the classes when I started out. I loved going to classes, but we're so lucky to have Diane.
But I thank you for that. But not just that, but you've invested in several different people coming across the country to teach at your store and to hone in on their skills and to teach your consumers. Or there's been people from out of state coming in and out of the little metro area to bring people in. Again, there is so much on these machines. So you're never going to learn it all. I'm never going to be able to explain everything on here and do everything on it. There's just not enough time. No matter how many buttons and seconds they save me, there's still not going to be enough time to go through all of it. But the more that you can do and the more you know about your machine and invest the time in, I think that's going to make it much more enjoyable for using it.
And don't be afraid of it.
Right. And then of course, then we had 6 more fills at the time. So I think that brought us from 30 to 30. So the Destiny went from 5 to 10 to, I should know, but numbers. And then the Solaris had 30, I believe it came out with, and then this one added 6, so there's 36, and then the second upgraded added another 6, so then we're up to 42. So,
and I believe if you own palette, you have even
more
options.
And then on the region fill, you can change it, so they call it thicker or thinner. So one of the icons, how you can change the direction of the fill. One of the things they add is that you can make it so it's a lighter stitch, more airy. So you have a little bit more control over that. Again, when I start showing some of these samples, how we've layered fills, now you can take some of the layered fills and maybe have a thicker one and then add an airy one on top of it.
So again, you're making your own fill.
Yep.
You design it.
And then, when you're an IQ designer, if you were on the Destiny and let's say you had put a circle on the screen and you were going to design that, and then you wanted to add a little heart, and if they overlapped and you wanted to select the heart, you really couldn't if they overlapped, because if you tried, you had to draw a box around the area that you wanted to select. Well, if you draw a box around the heart and it overlapped a little bit, you've captured part of the circle.
Right.
So they've actually changed they've given us more options on the select, that you can, in Solaris, you can draw like a little lasso around something and then delete it. There's a little magic wand, you can touch something.
Wow.
So that's been a huge benefit too. I think people really like that. And then in upgrade 2, well, in upgrade 1, they added the monitoring app, which I already talked about. But then upgrade 2, the endpoint sewing. So for those of us that have been embroidering using the stickers, the ones that look like snow friends. And so now they have another sticker so that you can, if you want to stitch on the sewing part and you want to end at a very particular place, you can put a sticker. In the past, we used the sensor pen, where now it's all built in with the kind of the camera and use a sticker. So once I get home and I'll have my upgrade, I'm going to start playing with some of that.
We'll be doing a project with that, definitely.
Be doing a project, yes. And then there's, like I said, the 6 more fills. And there's some new quilt sash patterns. There's some that are like 2 color. I have not had a chance to play with any of that quilt sash thing at all, but that's something else that I'm really looking forward to.
I have seen it in action and it's amazing.
Well, and now you can do almost a king size quilt or
you
something.
can do a king size quilt. You can do your border and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
We are going to be doing that also. I mean, I love that. And they do that one where it's
the hexagon.
Oh, the hexagon. It's beautiful.
Now, I know a friend of mine said she had created a design using the hexagon, and then she came in on the outside of the hexagon and did some decorative stitching, and she uses that endpoint feature. And so she came down one side here and she said, I want the endpoint right where it turns the corner. So she does her endpoint right at the corner, and then she pivots her fabric and then does it here. I want the endpoint to be now at this point.
So like magic, everything lines up. The stitch is perfect. Oh,
right.
I love that.
So there's like no excuse now that we have errors on our on our things. There's 50 more embroidery designs, and I mean, some of these designs are beautiful. I saw some of the ones that were lemons and stuff. They're just beautiful designs. So, and again, that IQ positioning app so that you can send something wirelessly. So as far as that part, I hope you found some value in what I went over today as far as setting yourself up in the embroidery settings. Again, every project, then restore your settings to that particular thing. Then you know you're starting with a clean slate and that you're not having to backtrack and go, oh my gosh, what didn't I change? What, you know, and it just makes life a lot easier. If you have settings that you like to use all the time, I would just make like a little note or a Post-it note or something that, you know, anytime I do my basting, I like to be this far away from my design. But for the most part, I think it's easier to start with a clean slate and make changes than to backtrack.
And make sure, you know what, take the time to play with it and look and see all these things that go on, because it's the only way you're going to be able to utilize all these functions and do some amazing things on your quilt or your projects, your clothing, whatever you are working on. But because this machine is an amazing tool to help you get your projects done.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
Okay, so now what I want to focus on is, now that I've done some of this and I've set myself up for something like this, I don't know about you all, but a lot of times I feel the need to play, but I can't think of a project I want to make. But I just feel like I want to escape. I want to play or try something different, but I don't have a project, or maybe I don't have enough time to invest into a project. So I'm going to show you some of the things that I have done that I think you'll find very valuable if, again, it's going to serve as a reference. And so I've created a binder. And if you can see, this is like a 3-inch binder here. I actually created my the cover using all different decorative fills and the Candle Wicking Stitches. So now my binder is much more attractive. I have the same designs on the front and the back. So this was 2 different hoopings. And then it's not going to be wide enough to go around the whole thing. So I had to do another for the spine of it and just wrapped it around, add a little trim. But to me, it's a lot prettier than just having a white or black binder. You know, and it was fun to create. So this is some of the things that in my classes I encourage you to do if you have the time. I like to do a lot of stitch outs, and don't have to necessarily go through every single page here, but I do have sheet protectors, And I usually take 2 pieces of cardstock and put it in there. And I like to have my cardstock all matchy-matchy, so it looks nice. And I have gone through and I actually have a couple binders, but I have stitched all the fills that are available on the machine. Because if you notice sometimes too on, when you see an embroidery design on your screen, it's always much prettier stitched out than it is on the screen. So I have done the embroidery fills. Now, one of the things that I do is I will cut 10-inch squares, and I will fuse. So I'll just get whatever fabric I want to use. Typically, I use like an Essex linen or something that's going to stitch up nicely. Mine get a lot of workout. So I will have a piece of cutaway in my hoop, and then I will fuse all my fabric. This is one of my very favorite stabilizers. This is called the Ultra Soft Fusible. And it is like a low loft batting, really low loft batting, but it's a great stabilizer. It is fusible. And so I start off with a 10-inch square, and I always stitch but when I choose my design, I choose one that will fit in the 8x8 hoop.
Okay.
Okay. Because my page is 8.5 by 11, right?
It's perfect.
So I want it to be able to fit from side to side. So when I do mine, I do the fill, and then I always do a satin stitch outline.
Okay.
And I always leave that at the default, which is I think the 2mm satin stitch. So now I have something that fits in the 8x8 hoop, but I can now cut a 1/4 inch on either side of my line. So now I end up with 8.5, and my page is what? 8.5 by 11.
Oh, perfect.
And then I like to use a zigzag rotary cutter or a pinking rotary cutter, because I just think it's prettier than just doing a straight cut. So when I want to go to use this fill in an application, in a design, then it's easier for me to thumb through the picture and to decide which one that I want to use.
Wow.
I'm also, because I use this for presentation also in classes, if it's as much as possible, I like it to have, so my colors match on the right and the left, for the most part, until you have to throw one into the mix. But now I can see, like this one here is little toucans, the little bird, the toucans. But this one's the owls. But to see how they're stitched out, I think it just makes a huge difference as opposed to what you're looking at. This one might be hard to see because it's dark purple.
So how do you remember the stitch that you did?
I could put a little label up here.
Okay.
I mean, it's just one of the fills, so I could easily.
Oh, it's just a regular fill. Okay.
Yeah. So I could have put what number it was.
So now you can actually see it.
So now I can see it stitched out. And then on the Solaris, and I didn't do it on here, but one of the things on the Solaris, like on here, this one, to me, it either looks like a seashell or it looks like a little girl's dress.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And you can also shift the design over. So if you didn't want this to be the center, maybe you can offset it a little bit. And that could be a whole nother exercise that you would do. So I've just, again, stitching them out gives me an idea of maybe when I work on something, which one I think I might like to use.
I love it because it is very, it's easy, it's inspirational.
Yeah.
Actually, we're working on a project where each block is quilted in the embroidery machine, and some of these would make great backgrounds. I love that.
It also gives you and then I like to sometimes pick out some thread colors that I wouldn't normally use maybe in a design and throw them on a piece of fabric, and you'd be kind of surprised at how it pops or something. You go, I didn't even think about maybe using that, and all of a sudden that's my new favorite color. So here we have, I love this green. It really pops. Oh, yeah. The green really pops. The purple seems like this little bubble. Oh, sorry, backwards. This bubble one here. Love that.
Oh, I know. How fun.
Again, there's 42 of them, and you can just keep going on and on and on. I don't have all 42 in here because they They don't all fit. You know, I've got the ones in the desk.
Diane has 500 binders at home.
I said, I've been coming to Kiki so long now, and every time I come, I keep bringing more and more samples. I said yesterday, if and when I decide not to come back or they don't want me back, I'm going to have a semi take all my stuff back home.
So here's a sample of leaving a little note, right?
Yes.
Of what you have done.
So on
sand dunes.
Yes. So on this one, and when we do, when I do teach classes, a lot of times in the projects or when we do the some of the more intricate classes, you have all these fills, but you can also layer the fills and put one fill on top of another and change the direction of them. So on some of these, I've actually put like the recipe card that I actually did. Sand dunes is just kind of one that's just kind of a wavy line. And I brought it in once and I had the angle just at 0. And then I brought it in a second time with a different color and I changed the direction to 90 degrees. And so it just gave me a whole different look. This one was layering one on top of the other, and I think I rotated it 45 degrees.
So look at how great the layering is. I mean, you can make
you can create
designs forever. I mean,
and you don't have to layer. You don't have to layer the same design on top of another. So I have some in another binder that I did circles and diamonds. So it doesn't have to be diamonds on top of diamonds. But then I usually, like I'll jot it down on a piece of paper, but I don't always remember exactly. So I have to have like a little recipe card here at the top of what I've changed. It might be the angle, it might be the size. On the Solaris, you can now offset them. So if I wanted to replicate this work, this look, you know, what would I do? But again, by doing some of this, then when I go to apply it to a project, I don't have to recreate the wheel.
No.
I can just sit down and do it. And this one I really liked here because it was multicolor. And let's see, I changed the direction and then I offset it. So.
Now this is really cool to do, like you said, because if you want to do something, but you don't want to go into maybe a project, make your samples. And then, you know, that's fun.
But I think sometimes this too also, it lends itself as inspiration.
Absolutely.
Maybe you went into your sewing room thinking you didn't know what you wanted to do and you start stitching this up and then you go, oh my God, that would look great doing blah, blah, blah. Or it would be great to, we always throw out a pillow there, but if you were looking for a fill, you know, for a ghost, you know, a ghost maybe, you know, to pull out one. So, you know, these are just more of the fills. But then one of the things I wanted to really, because this is just more of the same, get back here. This is probably here one of the most eye-opening exercises that I had done and that I teach. That we have the fill properties and then we also have line properties. And so the line you can change, it depends on the line, but you can change different attributes. So for the candle wicking, let's say, you can change that candle wicking stitch to have a candle wicking stitch that's a 3 millimeter all the way up to a 10 millimeter. Well, to me, that when I first got it, I went, okay, so what does that mean? And so what I did is I drew a series of lines and then I applied a candle wicking stitch to each one of the lines. But on this one, then I did, this is a 3, this is a 4, 5, 6. So now I can see, what is the difference? Oh, now I see the difference between what a 10 and a 3 looks like. So if I was going to outline a little bitty circle, if I put these large candle, whoops, I'm backwards. If I put the large candle wicking on the outside, that may look too overpowering. You know, so in that case, the smaller one may be a better idea. I had created a pillow where all I did was candle wicking stitches, just rows of candle wicking. If I had done little bitty candle wicking stitches, it would have, you know, made your eyes go crazy. that would have been too much, you know, so it was more of a design element to use the large candle wicking stitch.
So you really get an idea by doing it this way. And
then there's also in between each size. So if there's like the 3 and then the 4, in between the two, there's a 3.1, 3.2, 3. You know, all the way up to 3.9 till it gets to the 4. I did not stitch those out. I just stitched them in whole numbers. And then the other thing that you can do is you can change the spacing in between those candle wicking stitches. So on this one here, this is the size 10 candle wicking. And then I also did the spacing. This is like, there's only 3 little spaces in between each candle wicking. So they're a lot closer together compared to this row here, where it's a size 10 candle wicking, and now I left a space that's 10 in between. But again, until I had done this exercise,
You don't see it.
I had no idea what they were talking about.
That's cool.
I always compare it to someone teaching someone how to drive and say, okay, so this car will go from 0 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour. But you would never take that car and live through it. If you took that car through a school zone and went 100 miles an hour, you'd be in big trouble. So there's reasons for doing the things that we do. Okay, on the chain stitch, this is the chain stitch here, that you have the ability on the chain stitch to do it in a size 3, 4, and 5. So that's really how big those little diamonds are.
Right.
And so obviously the 5, you can tell at the bottom. And so I also embroidered 3, 4, and 5. So I knew as a reference. But then for the 5, I can see that that's a much more open area stitch, where the 3, they're all compressed together.
And it's a totally different look.
Right.
Okay.
And then so on the opposite page, you can also do a repetition, and you can do a repeat. You can say how many times do you want it to stitch on top of each one of those diamonds. And you can go from a 2 to a 6. So I did those here. So this is doing it where it stitches on top of itself 6 times versus the opposite side where it just went 2 times.
Wow.
So again, are you looking for something more open and airy, or do you want something that adds texture and dimension? Again, if I hadn't done this, again, it'd be hard to see, hard to visualize. Then it also offers you on the satin stitch that you can have a width from 1 millimeter all the way up to 6. So I have my satin stitches stitched out, and what width. Again, if I had a little small design and I did that size 6, it'd be too overpowering. The size 1 might be a better choice. I typically default somewhere between the 3 and 4 is usually what
You're leaving the book at Kiki's, right?
Yes.
So, you can come in and look at the book.
Yeah.
Just ask us. We'll show it to you. And Diane's here for the next, for the rest of this week and next week. So come by and say hi.
I've had several people ask me if I would make them a book, and I'm like, you can't afford my book. It takes too long.
No, you want to make your own book, because that's the whole point.
Right.
It's like you really learn how to do it. Let's get in on this one. This is really cool.
This is the Solaris. These are the different outlines that are available on the Solaris, where on the Destiny we had the bean stitch, running stitch, satin stitch, and candle wicking and chain. Now the Solaris added all the different decorative stitches
I love
as the outline.
that. Look at that.
So I stitched all of those out. Again, a great visual.
Oh, yeah.
And some of them, I don't know if you can see it on this. Oh, yeah. So some of them you look at and you go, I'm not really sure what I would use that for. Like that one that she's pointing right there. It's kind of like, I don't know if we want to call it an erratic zigzag or kind of like a grass stitch.
It's
and
grass.
I was like, I wasn't sure, maybe what you would use that on, but I'd stitched another pillow that had the word boo on it. And to me, that kind of was the perfect outline for it, because it kind of looked scary. Instead of just your basic.
It's a little distressed looking.
Right. And then here you can change the size of them and change the width and the length of them, and then flip them. So I did a couple little samples of those.
And make your sample book yours. I mean, you don't have to be, like perfectly aligned.
Unless you want to bring them in and we'll grade them.
Diane will grade yours.
And then here we just have rows of the stitches.
I love that. You can see, here's that fun, you can't see it that clear. That's that grass stitch.
Right.
It's uneven and it's really cool looking. I love this one.
But again, a lot of fun things to play with. And then you can see, to me, I am a visual person. I think most sewers are. And I think that you really need that kind
You
of
need to see it.
visualization.
Yeah.
And especially if you want to work on a project and you're not really sure what you want to do, this may be the perfect thing, instead of in the midst of your project going, okay, and sometimes I'm guilty of this too, that you get so far and go, oh, it needs something else. I need to add something else. Well, if I had like looked at the book again, then I could have maybe concepted a little bit more before I got into the project.
Really cool stuff.
And there's some other stitches, the same thing, changing the width and changing the length of them. And we have some samples
look
here
at that.
of
That's cool.
same design brought in and then offset each other. But again, they look totally different. Let's see, I think they're basically the same though. But these are just how when you offset it, where the little starburst align. So one design, but again, it looks like four different designs. So when you think and now with the Solaris, it seems like you really get a full package of stitches. I mean, we got a lot with the Destiny, obviously, and we thought we'd all died and gone to heaven when we got the machine in. But like I said, when you had, the 5 fills, we want more. And then now you have 42. But then when you look at how you can use them in conjunction with one another, how you can add one on top of another, how you can combine them, how you can take some of the outlines and make it totally look different, how you can add, change the direction. I mean, all this stuff, it gives you more than a library of 42 stitches. It gives you more of a library of 10 outline stitches that the possibilities, truly are.
Are you going to show them?
Yes. So one of the things too is that I've mentioned that when you do the decorative fills, one of the things that you can do is you can change the size of the fill. So you can take it from 50%. The default is obviously 100%. But you can take that fill and you can change it from 50% up to 200%. So we have some stitch outs here. And
here we can.
Oops, on this way. I pulled all the same shape. I pulled the diamonds so we can do a comparison. And so when you can see some of this on the screen, but I think it serves as a great visual that.
And look at this.
Let's kind of talk about this. So if you had a 3-inch, let's say you had a little 2-inch circle, and I'll just try to replicate it here with my hands. If I wanted to fill this little circle, I'm getting pretty much detail, right? With that small diamond, that's stitching that pattern at 50%. That would give me a pretty good fill. If I did the same circle on the 200%, I'm getting like one diamond.
Yeah.
So that's not going to give me the detail that I'm looking for. So here we've stitched out, these were on the Destiny. Here we have the diamonds at 50%, at 100%, at 150%, and at 200%. So to me, again, this is a huge eye opener.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to, and obviously you can go in between 50 and 100. There's several other, 50, 60, 70, 55, several different options that you can choose from. But depending on the area that you want to fill really kind of dictates what size fill that you want to do. Some are overpowering. Some are going to leave you with no detail whatsoever.
But when you look at these side by side, you really get, it really
huge.
shows you. Yeah. It's amazing what this machine has inside.
Oh, yeah. Let me just pull this one quickly because I think it was on the... But you can take, let's say, so I isolated just the diamonds because they're not all in the same order. But then here are the roses, and this was at 200%. This would be something great if you wanted to do it on a lighter color fabric and maybe paint it.
Oh,
color
that
it,
would
paint
be
it,
really
create
cool.
your own fabric.
Here it is at. Is that at the same?
That one's at.
It's a little. Oh, okay.
That one's at 150%. Mine's at 200.
Okay.
But then
How
if I,
fun
but
would
then if I
that
pulled the
be?
one that was just at 50%, it's just,
Oh, look at
it's not as
that.
pretty.
But you know what? It looks like tapestry to me.
It does. You're right.
Amazing.
You're right. It does.
Look at that. It's unlimited.
Uh-huh.
It gets a little overwhelming because it's so unlimited.
Now, there's still, many more of these to do. I probably, again, we use these in classes, so we want to be able so people can see in a classroom. But for your own use, you could do obviously much smaller. You don't have to fill up the whole hoop with this. I've seen some people, well, they will take and they will bring in the design and they will do, maybe in this corner, they'll do like a little square and they'll do that 50%. Then they'll do a little bit larger square and frame it. That'll be 100. And then, so it'll graduate and it'll all be on one.
Oh, that's perfect.
On one thing. Again, if you're going to go through the trouble, either this one was serged together so that you have it as a reference. It takes a lot of time to do, or to put them in a binder so that you can easily reference them. If you're going to take the time to do them, you might as well be able to use them.
I mean, it's gorgeous. But again, you come in the class, come into the store, and you can see these. We'll bring them out for you. Some of them are out on the tables, but certain ones are in one of the classrooms. And we'll be more than happy to show it to you. Again, you can take pictures of them because that helps you with your ideas of what you want to do and fill stitches. I'm seeing a lot more people doing regular quilts. Like, let's take a look at the quilt behind me. You can see they're taking quilts like that, and they are doing amazing patterns with their Solarises and Destinies and filling them in, and they look amazing.
Well, the nice thing is too, is that you have the ability to scan. So if you did a block, you have the ability to scan on the Solaris and then fill in that area. So you can see exactly where you want it to be. And you can put down your parameters and say, I want you to stitch in this area.
Absolutely.
And fill that whole block with the decorative stitches. So, I mean, you think about, and I'm not a huge quilter by any stretch of the imagination, much less an award-winning quilter or somebody that's going to be entering any kind of thing in a competition. But I mean, I've heard stories too, like back in the day, I mean, if it was a quilt and if you were going to enter it in a contest, it had to be hand quilted to be a real quilt. And then it kind of evolved into machine quilting was okay. Straight stitch quilting was okay, and then embroiderers start entering and they're like, oh my gosh, that was just wrong. Well, now that whole thing has opened up, and because the machines can do so much, and I think about some of the quilts that my mother-in-law had given us. So much of the time quilters get so hung up on the fact if they're free motion or whatever, that the stitches have to be perfect, that they have to be the same stitch length. You don't want a long jump stitch and then something small. But think about in the I guess old days. I mean, my mother-in-law, I mean, she would make the quilt top and then she'd bring it to church and it would go on a quilt frame and it would sit there for how long till everybody got it done. But then there were all these quilters that were stitching on them, and not everybody has the same tension and stitch length. And even if you do it over the course of the weeks, you could be working in the same area, and from one day to the next, you're not going to be the same.
Which gives it, that's what makes it so wonderful.
Yeah, and we get so hung up on now that
the perfection
everything has
of
to be perfect.
No, it doesn't.
And if we really are looking for that, what better way to do it than by machine embroidery?
I know.
Between that and the decorative stitches that you can do on the embroidery, and so.
Of course, now you're going to get lost in time with this because it's one of those things that once you sit at it and you start it. Do any of you have any questions for us? We're here for you. Susan Zellers is waiting to help respond if you have anything that you want to ask us. What we really would love is to have some good feedback, to let us know what you want to see, the types of classes that you would be interested in, whether they be virtual or in-house. The other thing is that Diane is going to be developing a lot more projects for us, as our other ambassadors of education are going to be doing. We are here for you. Diane is here again until the end of next week. So come on by. Also, make sure you check our website for all the classes that are coming up. And we will be putting in, probably within the next month or so, things for 2021. And we have our destination education that we are planning on getting back up for 2021 and making everything happen again, and having some fun quilting and sewing. Is there anything you want to add?
I think, it's the way of the world right now. Everybody's doing virtual classes. It's it's just kind of the way of the world. And there's pros and cons to it. To me, this is nice talking to you, and you can watch it at the leisure of your home. I mean, I think that's nice. Then you can go back and view it again and again. I'm sure you will. I'm sure you're going to want to log into this video 100 million times.
And see us.
But there's still nothing better than a hands-on class.
Absolutely.
There's still nothing better than that camaraderie. And then when I'm teaching, I love to see the light bulb go off, when somebody goes, oh my gosh, I finally get it. Or it always seems like it's stumped the teacher. Well, what do you think? Can you do this? And so some of the things are like, well, I don't know. I never thought about that.
Absolutely.
And so then you try it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I hope we can get back to when we're doing more hands-on classes. And there's so many learning opportunities that develop in a classroom situation. And typically they are determined by someone making a mistake. Because if we just went through and do this virtually and press this or this button and voila, it's done, then that seems all well and good, but it isn't until you make a mistake and how you get yourself out of that mess.
That's when you really learn.
That's when you really learn. Yeah.
And taking classes for specific projects, you learn a lot more then. We miss seeing everybody in person, like Diane said. And the next best thing to getting us into your home and having us feel like you're a little bit in our home is the Kiki TV, which, we're hoping that kind of helps for those that can't get out yet, or, that live far away. But again, if you're in town, come on in. If you're far away, always contact us at info@kikisquiltcheck.com. You can send me emails. You can call. They'll give you the email address, or just go on our Facebook site or our website, and you can get all the information that you need. Tomorrow we have another virtual class happening with Susan Zellers, and it's a serger class that we're going to be doing. So keep in touch. We miss seeing all of you, and a lot of thank you to our wonderful production company, CDH Productions and Mill Road Productions. They're doing an amazing job. They made a studio for us. Love the studio. It's nice and cozy, and it feels beautiful. And I feel like I'm on stage. We still have
demands. I mentioned some demands yesterday. I want a makeup artist. I want a wardrobe person. I want a hairstylist.
They're working on it.
So we're working on some of those demands. But
the Kiki head really would like some help. But again, please let us know what you want, what you like. Actually, give us feedback on what you don't like, because it helps us learn, and that way we'll know what to give you. And I think that's about all that I can think of today.
I want to just say thank you. Thank you for supporting us by, coming in and watching these videos. Thank you. I mean, I've been coming here for 2-3 years now. I appreciate the fact that you all have come in and have taken classes, so that enables me to keep coming back, that there's some value in it for the store. I absolutely love doing this. It warms my heart that that people want to learn and that I keep coming back. So I really appreciate you all. And, but I want to see you.
I know, we miss
Right.
seeing you. And remember, education is the most important thing for all of us, because when we have these wonderful, beautiful machines that we have really invested a lot of money and time and into, these are quality machines that we need to learn how to use, because
Absolutely.
it's a shame to let them just sit there. Again, we miss seeing all of you. Thank you. And hopefully everybody will come in. And those of you that are far away, you're going to be able to make trips out someday. We know.
Yep.
All right. Take
The
care.
airlines are flying.
See ya.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye. That was good.